All right, folks, Olivia Chow is stirring it up and creating quite the circus with the local MPs of Toronto. We're going to drill down into what they're fighting about and also look at what the feds are talking about regarding visa applications for foreign students. I'm Vince Gaetano. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Wise Old Owl Show. We're at episode 165, so thank you for tuning in. And to all of you who continuously watch every week, I really want to thank you all for your loyalty and follow. But first, let's talk about what Olivia Chow has done. She's created basically a circus about this property tax hike. And in all fairness, I think it's brilliant because she's gotten the federal MPs in 416, that's the Toronto area, to bite on what she wants to create. So for those that aren't aware, the Toronto City property tax hike that's proposed is 10.5% this year, but it has a caveat. If the federal government does not prop up the refugee settlement program by $250 million, that property tax hike will be 16.5%. A little bit of blackmail, I would say, but I think it's quite clever because the Toronto MPs couldn't help themselves by whining, crying, and creating a ruckus in the media. We had Yvonne Baker and James Maloney on CTV complaining that the city shouldn't be asking for more handouts. Shut the hell up, folks. Why are you going into the lion's den and creating more attention to this matter? Olivia Chow has played this brilliantly. She's now pitted people against politicians that whine. They don't want to hear it, folks. Residents of the city of Toronto do not want to hear politicians whine, especially those that loathe this liberal government that's been to blame for most of the problems that everybody's facing. Higher cost of living, longer lineups at food banks, rent increases going out of control, mortgage interest rates. Everybody is struggling and they want sympathy. Here's a note for politicians. People do not care how you feel. Get the fucking job done. That's what people want. And trying to make this an issue and have people take positions between politicians is wrong. You know, Scott Reed, one of the regular guests on the Curse of Politics that David Hurley runs, said it perfectly. Bad communication strategy. Shrug your shoulders and say, hey, we've given you millions of dollars. Deal with it. Learn how to budget your book. Learn how to figure out how to balance things out on your own end. We've given you enough. And this is where I think these federal MPs have failed. They've turned this into a bit of a circus. And what Olivia Chow is realizing, she's in the position of power right now because it's a losing battle for the feds now. They've now cornered themselves into possibly having to pony up. So I say it's brilliantly played, but let's talk a little bit about this refugee settlement program. So back in November, I think it was late November, CTV did a piece on this. Olivia Chow was suggesting that we were under a lot of undue pressure by all these refugees coming to Toronto. And at the time, there was about 3,900 refugees in shelters, and they were providing support to about another 1,200 outside of these shelter systems. And this was a 50% increase over the year before. So it's obviously been a burden on the city. And there's claims that we're now at about 5,800 refugees in the city of Toronto. So it's been creeping up. Back in November, it was sitting at about 5,100. We're now already upwards of 5,800. So she's asking for $250 million to service 5,000 refugees in the city of Toronto. Now, I like doing the math. This equates to about $50,000 per refugee. Holy shit, that's a lot of money. And the more I think about it, the more I'm not very comfortable having the federal government dole over $250 million to somebody running the city of Toronto who can't balance the fucking budget? Like, where will this $250 million go? Like, here's the disconnect for me. I'm not sure that I would trust the city of Toronto with $250 million to be appropriated properly. Like, can you imagine all the bureaucratic red tape, all the additional jobs they're going to create to service this group of people that probably won't experience anything any more different than what they're experiencing now, other than a roof over their head? So I'm a little bit suspect. I'll probably take a lot of darts for this, but the reality is $50,000 per person for 1 year, because they're still going to be here if they're not repositioned into society. And let's face it, there's not a lot of shelters out there. They're not being built fast. And as far as job opportunities, probably not the greatest in a declining market. So how long will these refugees need to be getting support? Are they going to give out another $250 million next year? Like, when does this stop? How does this end? Tell me the story, folks. And this just doesn't bode well. So, folks, I think what we need is more accountability from our politicians at all levels. We got to figure out what's going on, and you got to stop letting people in here. We can't house them, okay? Now, we also have a little bit of a debate between Sean Fraser, who's now the housing minister and former immigration minister, and Mark Miller, who is now the current immigration minister. So a few months back, I think it was back in August, they said immigration's great, we shouldn't do anything, we need to bring people in, and now they've changed their tune. Guess what? They had a retreat, they pivoted on their platform, and now Mark Miller's saying we need to cap student visas and look at maybe capping them in 3 provinces, Ontario, BC, and Nova Scotia. Well, hello, we've been talking about this topic probably now since 2019, 2020 when I first mentioned it. I really believe they've been late at the game here. These problems have been going on for a while. We've had these diploma mills, I'll call them, bringing people in, backdooring folks into permanent residency through these fake admissions. And you know what? Sean Fraser knew all about this back in May when there was protests at Pearson International Airport by folks being deported because they were let in with false admission letters. He knows all about this. So it's not like this is a surprise, okay? This is just a delay because people have realized that things are starting to break. And we really need to hone in on who these characters are. Who are these bad actors causing these situations? And you have to make sure they're dealt with. We got to put them out of business. We have folks that are bringing people in under false pretenses, making us look bad as a country. And guess what? Our reputation is slowly going downhill globally because of this shit that's happening. We really need to get a handle on it. And folks, we got to start putting pressure on these post-secondary education institutions and say, listen, you want visas? No problem. Build a residence, build accommodations for as many as you want, and we'll give you those visas. If you can't accommodate them, you're not getting the additional visas. And you put pressure on these universities to invest in the facilities and residences that could, dormitories, whatever the case is, to house the folks they want to educate. Because right now, it's not about education, it's all about enrollment. It's a cash grab, it's all for profit, and quite frankly, it doesn't work, okay? It's putting pressure on the system. And the reality is a lot of these folks that are coming in through the back door are bringing in family members and all that. Because when you have 900,000 foreign students, young people don't necessarily clog up emergency rooms, okay? Young people are relatively healthy. They're not the ones that are getting sick and are needing health care. It's usually folks that are older. And what these permanent residents end up doing is they bring over family members, and they're not tax-paying family members, but they use our resources. I'll probably get a few more darts for that comment. But the reality is the housing that's being built, primarily one-bedroom condos, are not going to facilitate these people. These are families. So when you flip the coin and you talk about housing, are we building the right housing for these folks? And that's where I think we're going to run into bigger problems down the road, because I don't think we're dealing with the housing problem any better. Okay, we're just building the wrong ones. And folks, be ready for it. When rates do eventually come down, we're going to have another issue again that's just going to repeat itself because of bad policy, because of jamming people into this country for the sole reason of driving GDP. GDP that was being driven was the wrong GDP, because on a per capita basis, we're going downwards, okay? Over the last several years, we're at a terrible clip when you compare it to the US. Our gross domestic product, our productivity is absolutely shit. It's terrible, and we need to curb that. We need to start thinking about how we're going to innovate, how we're going to encourage research and development, how we're going to encourage innovation. And if this doesn't start turning, things will just get worse from a cost of living perspective, and we will be a poor nation with more people in the long run. So it is what it is. Hopefully we could curb that and try to ask our elected officials for accountability, and let's continue being a voice out there and asking for better, asking for innovation, asking for ways to make our productivity increase to a level where we could be proud of it and get out of this rut and back onto where Canada should be on the international stage and growing this economy in the right way. So on that note, I'll leave it there. What I will mention is that the Bank of Canada meetings over the next couple months, I think there's one on January 24th and another one on March 6th. There's not going to be a lot of good news. Okay, folks, inflation we saw increase a little bit for December, moving in the wrong direction. Not a good sign. It shows that inflation is going to be sticky, and we've seen the 5-year Canada bond rate move up again this week, which tells me that the Bank of Canada isn't going to be doing anything dramatic. So postpone any party that's going to be celebrating any type of Bank of Canada rate drops. It's not going to happen. A lot of activity in the marketplace, a lot of action, which is good on the real estate front, but not something the Bank of Canada wants to see. So don't get too excited when things continue to stay at elevated levels. For those that want to follow the bond market, we've seen an increase of about a quarter point. Last week we're sitting at 3.3. This week we're at 3.54, almost a quarter point increase in a week, which leads me to believe that next week's Bank of Canada meeting is not going to be good news, okay? Not going to be anything worth celebrating about. Respect the lag. We're going to be higher for longer, and just prepare yourself. Make sure you have emergency funds, safety net. Make sure those savings are accessible and liquid, and be careful being too heavily weighted in equities, because if things start turning, you're going to start seeing earnings numbers come down, stock prices potentially coming off of its high. So be very conservative. Make sure you're not stuck carrying something that you don't want to get out of and incur any losses and stuff like that. Protect your capital. You want to be liquid. You want to have availability to cash if you have it in savings, and it'll get you through the next 12 to 18 months, because I do believe we are in for this higher rate level and concerns about the economy for the next little bit. So be careful out there. And as far as the Porsche tracker is concerned, haven't reported it in the last couple weeks, but word is out that everybody's putting their Porsches back in their garages, put it in for storage for the winter. With all this snow and ice, no one's driving these things around. And we've seen a drop off in the amount of Porsches that are listed. We're sitting at about 1,117 right now. We were always hovering around that 1,200 mark, but we've seen a continuous drop off since Christmas, and it looks like, just before Christmas, sorry, and it looks like it's been receding down. Either people are getting good deals on them, or they're putting them away waiting for the spring market to pop up. So that's that. We're gonna head into this winter market, and usually we start getting some rate sales from lenders. We start getting some notices that the rates are coming down. It looks like with the bond market coming in at the levels it's at, I think we've bottomed out, or we've hit the floor of the fixed rates. But for those insured, those that have high ratio mortgages, we are seeing rates below 5% at 4.99 and just below that on the insured side for purchases. And on the conventional side, we're still in the mid fives. And on the alternative, we're still seeing sixes out there. So sixes, high sevens, low sevens. So there's opportunity, but it's still affordability. People are having a difficult time qualifying because of the stress test. The stress test still is preventing people to access cash. So we'll keep an eye on that and fill you in on how that trends over the next little while.